Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we will be talking about a potentially significant storm system that could be developing into the upcoming week. So this thing is going to be actually a very well organized storm for the time that it's occurring, usually in the northern hemisphere, especially for the area that I'm familiar with, the United States and southern Canada. Systems during the summer, early fall even sometimes are very usually loosely organized systems, and usually it's just a thunderstorm threat from any weak cold fronts. You don't really need a lot of oomph for storms to develop, and this thing will be kind of almost looking like a fall storm, similar to almost like a nor'easter, as that's the region that it will be occurring in. So it's always kind of fascinating to see something, I guess, anomalous. I don't really think there is anything too huge in terms of risks with this system. Obviously, it will have heavy rain, it will have thunderstorms, probably will be hazardous beach conditions, as it is going to be occurring on the coast. But yeah, I think it's just going to be a cool storm to look at least from the satellite imagery. And yeah, as I said, it has a lot of characteristics like the kind of classic kind of nor'easter, but again, it's just going to be all rain, obviously. So let me just start off by showing you what the system, what I'm even talking about. So do note that right now, I guess the beginnings of the storm are way out here. This is kind of a little low pressure that is going to contribute to its forming. So, areas like Michigan, Indiana, Illinois today, they're going to get impacted by some storms. Again, it's a very weak one, typical, barely a low pressure. And that thing is going to scoot off to the south and east. And that's not the only part, I guess, the only player in this. Obviously, there's a lot of moisture out here that's going to play into the strengthening of the system once it moves onto the coast come this upcoming start of the week. But notice, by Monday, right, or late Sunday into early Monday, it's affecting the mid-Atlantic. Really nothing too incredible. We are obviously noticing a large increase in terms of precip, but again, nothing too organized. However, as this low pressure kind of forms a strong area of convection across potentially the Carolinas. North Carolina is now favored. This thing moves out into the waters, and there are decent water temperatures here. Obviously, it's not like the Gulf of Mexico where you can just develop a hurricane pretty quickly, but it will develop and strengthen pretty quickly. Notice that by the time we are entering into Tuesday, so again, this isn't far out, and I waited with this video to I guess give you guys a good idea that this has a good chance of occurring, because the days before, yesterday, 2 days before, not only was there not really anything else to talk about other than the ongoing monsoon and just smaller events, but the models were disagreeing on the system. The European was showing it one day, the GFS was not, and then it kind of back and forth, and now it seems that it finally agreed on this system, and I want to make a video about it. So notice by Tuesday, it's a pretty sizable storm, has a nice little cold front, a nice area of circulation, but it continues strengthening, and do note that it does so very quickly. By late Tuesday, as it heads into Wednesday, we are seeing this system head just straight north into, Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and it is a very, at this point, very quickly intensifying storm. A lot of heavy rain with that, and this would be concerning if these areas did not need any more rain. But I was looking at the drought monitor, and a good portion of Massachusetts, Boston. And by the way, I do apologize if you hear squeaking. It's this little chair I'm sitting on. It's a little squeaker. But a lot of these areas here are actually under drought, and I do believe that a certain area here, right, I think in really near Boston, is in an extreme drought. So that that red color, one of the I guess the most unpleasant levels of drought that there is. I think there's only one more, and that's exceptional. So the rain itself isn't going to be necessarily bad. Obviously, even if you are in a very bad drought, if you see too much of it, it could flood. But that's going to be temporary, and we'll see. But let me just zoom in on this system, because you could see wrong region. It's very well organized. It's a very nice, powerful cold front. It kind of looks like a again, like a little nor'easter. If this was to be winter, you would expect to see some snow, pretty heavy snow out of this. And notice that, again, obviously it's just rain, but this could be a pretty nasty system. You could see rotating even eastward, so the winds will be from the northeast. Beaches will be probably pretty miserable this upcoming week for a lot of the northeast. And notice that this thing does intensify. The winds could be actually pretty significant, especially around the center of this thing. 7 a.m. This is early Wednesday morning, so again, your morning commute maybe for Wednesday pretty nasty, and this thing kind of weakens pretty quickly, but you can see it brings rain well into the upstate New England, Northeast area, and it, eventually kind of scoots off, but not before delivering probably cloud cover and just some rain showers for the next few days across the Northeast. So by the end of this week, Thursday, Friday is pretty much out of here. and I'll show you different models, but I just want to show you what this model shows in terms of rainfall. You can see quite a bit of rain, right? I mean, many areas, anywhere from 2 to 5 inches. Obviously, with kind of the event that it's, or I guess the time frame that it's occurring in, late summer, there will be a lot of convection, and that will obviously lead to isolated amounts that are probably higher than just the broad 2 to 4 inch ranges. Probably some even approaching 6-7 inches, which sounds like a lot, and that is. Again, even if it is very dry, some of that rain it could cause some flooding, though again it will be very, very limited in terms of its longevity because of just how really dry it is, and it's a kind of like a in a way, the earth has a lot of water to take into, but think about a sponge that is, dry, like just dry. If you pour a bunch of water on that sponge, initially it will kind of run off, right? Because if a sponge is slightly moist, that's when it could absorb the most water. Initially, I mean, not in terms of maybe not the most, but the most effectively. So that's the thing with this. If the soils are really, really dry, a lot of this may just initially run off the water, not really percolate if the rain is heavy enough. But, eventually it will start absorbing, and once it does, it can absorb a lot because of how dry it is. So that is that. That's from just one model. Let me show you a different model, the European model. It's the one that really kind of was showing this out of longer, I guess, earlier than what the GFS was showing. But then it kind of backed off, and now it's back in on that system. So I just, decided to make that video, especially since I don't think it'll be doing much more flip-flopping, or at least not to that same extent as this thing. It really isn't that far out. It's, a few days out. I mean, it's Saturday. This thing could be occurring on Tuesday and Wednesday and into Thursday. So notice, again, the first part of the system is going on right now across Illinois, Indiana, Michigan. In fact, we do actually have a marginal risk of severe weather. Again, nothing really impressive, but still, as with any thunderstorm, there's always a risk for hail, obviously strong wind, lightning, and all the threats you get with a regular thunderstorm. Notice that, there's a pretty nice swath of rain occurring across Michigan right now, and I could click on some of this marginal risk area and show you what the biggest threat is. Tornado, there's a decent threat because of the low pressure being relatively, I guess, has a lot of oomph. It is pretty weak, as you saw. I think it was like 10 millibars. Wind, obviously, and then hail. But again, 5% chance. That isn't really anything too significant. But just keep the eyes to the sky if you live in that area. You can see tomorrow, nothing again incredible as well. Tornado threat pretty much non-existent. Wind and hail is usually the typical threat that leads to a marginal. And on Sunday, you could start seeing some activity brewing here, and I can imagine that, with that system, there probably will be some, maybe not a severe weather event for the Northeast, as again, this is more of a kind of a heavy rainmaker, kind of a fall storm, but definitely, I could, probably some hail and wind, I do assume there probably will be marginal. And you can see probabilistic, they don't have the categories, they just show a little bit of severe weather. I would assume, again, wind and hail, maybe a slight tornado threat. And do note, so again, this system right there, you can see that's that. The circulation, again, 10-10, 10-11, it's not really strengthening as it goes through the United States, drops in through the Southeast. It's a really slow-moving thing. It starts organizing and mixing with these, with the energy off the coast. Again, there's not a strong jet stream, so it's not like if this thing speeds out of here, it has its sweet old time to kind of do what it wants, and it decides to strengthen, right? And again, late Monday, it starts delivering some showers, storms, nothing too incredible, though definitely scattered to widely scattered showers could be occurring. Late Monday into early Tuesday, we start seeing this thing, again, similar to what the GFS is showing, organized. But the European is quite a bit slower, because if you recall by the early Wednesday morning time frame, this thing was way up into the Northeast already, and this thing, let's just compare it to the GFS. You can see the GFS had a pretty quickly more organized system. The European takes its sweet old time. So this is now Tuesday. Kind of mid-morning into the early and mid-afternoon into the late evening. It may seem like it's not developing anything at all. And, for a good while, it will just be kind of meandering off the coast. Not necessarily, again, there's not a lot of direction from the jet stream. There's no tight millibars of wind, so this thing just kind of sits around aimlessly, and with warm waters relatively under it, it will start to intensify and strengthen. And notice that the European does show this. With every kind of 3 hour, you can see it drops a few millibars. By early Wednesday morning, if you recall, the GFS was showing a nasty storm already hitting New England, right? The European, not so much. It's definitely showing some activity, but it's still in the strengthening phases. So this isn't necessarily a good scenario, because if there is concerns in terms of rain, there could be a lot more with what the European brings, and because it's a slower moving system. Though it is a bit of a weaker storm, you can see it doesn't have as tight of a circulation as what the GFS shows, and the timing is a bit different. Notice that by late Wednesday, early Thursday, it's still hanging around and actually kind of delivering the worst of it. It's, the GFS at this point was quickly scurrying this thing and weakening it. So notice the European, it does get down to 1,000 millibars. So, again, nothing too powerful, but definitely a storm, right? Definitely a area of circulation. With this, I assume, if there were a lot of convection because of how usually during around large storms with big circulations, there's an enhanced tornado threat. Whether or not that will be the case here, probably not. It doesn't, honestly, the parameters don't look too impressive for a massive concern. But do notice that, again, Thursday morning, it's all there through most of the day, and it doesn't necessarily end up even hitting the coast. It kind of just skims it, but it takes quite a bit longer to go through. The amount of rain releases is actually quite a bit, not as far inland, again, wrong region, as what the GFS shows, but you can see, Boston, right, you could be picking up 2 to 4 inches, and at that point, again, if this were to actually materialize these amounts, that wouldn't be necessarily too bad. That would actually be probably a pretty good scenario, as, again, they are in an extreme drought, so I'm sure a lot of people would actually want that rain, especially since the European doesn't show any crazy intensification. Whether or not, that's not the case, we'll have to see, because, a lot of the high-res models, high-range models, they often show us the details of how quickly this may actually intensify, and these big long-range ones kind of fail to do so. So, I don't want to discount the GFS with its pretty tight area of circulation. It's kind of almost like a hurricane. You know how sometimes you use a GFS in European to track a hurricane? It shows a storm, but you really wait for the high-resolution models to really see the intensity of the storm. And, this thing, according to GFS, really does intensify pretty quickly. Obviously, there are cool waters here, so it wouldn't be unlimited intensification. But I wouldn't be surprised if, we see, an AM12KM in the next few days or whatnot, develop this system into a decently strong system, maybe even, 990 or whatnot, and that could deliver some definitely, I wouldn't say damaging winds, but some gusty gales and just make things worse. So we're going to have to keep an eye on this, as, it's not unheard of to see hurricanes here at this, in this area. I'm not saying this is a hurricane. It's really going to probably be too weak, but it just depends how quickly it does intensify. I want to show you the Canadian model. It's another model I like to use for forecasting. Let me just run this through. Again, the system starts off here. It's a bit cut off. Again, organizes with this moisture, and you can see the Canadian. What it does is it's really, I like using the model, so it's because it has sometimes some valuable input. What the Canadian does, it really keeps the system kind of off the shores for a while, and only really delivers kind of a little glancing blow with some showers across Maine, really just New England. So that would be probably the best case scenario if you don't want any nasty weather, the Canadian. But again, I do prefer the European and the GFS over the Canadian in most occasions. Let's take a look at what the icon shows. This is a German model. It's had its fair share of successes, though again, not my favorite in terms of forecasting. Let's see what it shows. Again, it does show an area of circulation, some mixing here with that little system that comes on off the land. And you can see that it's, I guess way out here across the, southern Canadian area has the storm system. So kind of similar to what the Canadian shows. It really doesn't favor a big system. NavGem, this is a decent model, but it is, it's definitely usable. Notice that it takes this system a bit closer to shore, similar to what the GFS and European do, but still relatively further off. But again, when the European and GFS agree relatively, I prefer those things, and that's why I'm just saying significant storm possible, because it's still, it could still change quite a bit. And really, the ones that go out to 84 hours, they are showing the system, except, we don't really get much info out of this, other than the fact that, the NAM family does support it. The RGEM is kind of a high res of the Canadian, so take it probably further off coast, definitely shows something, though. And, yeah, the high range ones, it goes out to 60 hours. It's not far out enough. If you had another 60 hours out, that would be far enough to see. But yeah, for now, that's basically it. That's kind of all I wanted to cover. And yeah, hopefully you guys, you learned something new. Hopefully you just, maybe a bit more prepared for what may be coming. But otherwise, this is just, again, a storm that probably won't be really too bad, but definitely could, tamper your plans or whatnot and cause some nasty conditions. So I'm going to keep you guys keep you guys updated on this and watch, you know, the incoming model runs. Make a video tomorrow if in case, you know, the GFS apparently, not apparently, if it does, you know, actually end up intensifying this even more, then obviously that would be a nastier system. I mean, you can see some of these are some pretty dark colors. That would be some pretty heavy rain. Definitely something to watch, and you know, a lot of populated areas here, so that's something to note for. I could show you its wind with this. With the graphic here, and you can see that some of them, I mean, they are reaching to 40, 45 miles per hour, or sorry, knots. So in terms of mileage, that's probably close to 50. You know, that would be pretty significant in terms of sustained winds. So that is definitely something also to note for. And again, as I mentioned, the beach conditions will be miserable. Even if the system does take a system that's further, or a track that's further out, it still will have impacts. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next episode. See ya. Bye.